I had just turned 17 when my parents decided to buy a new house. It wasn't far from our old one, still in the same part of Michigan, but this one was bigger, nicer, and had a backyard pool. The pool was a major selling point for me. I couldn't wait to have friends over for pool parties and late-night swims. The whole place felt like it was meant for fun and relaxation. The first night I invited my girlfriend Spencer to come over and take a dip. Spencer had dark blonde hair and these bright, clear eyes that always seemed to catch the light. We were splashing around, laughing, and just enjoying the evening. The water wasn't warm, but it wasn't freezing either. Perfect for a cool Michigan night. Out of nowhere, I heard this rustling in the bushes at the edge of the yard. At first, I thought maybe a raccoon or something was digging through the plants, but then the rustling got louder, like something heavy was moving around back there. Spencer noticed I was distracted and asked, "What's wrong?" "I think I heard something in the bushes," I said. "Stay in the pool. I'm going to check it out." I climbed out of the water, grabbed a towel and dried off just enough to keep from freezing. I turned on my phone flashlight and pointed it toward the bushes. Nothing. The rustling stopped as soon as I got near. I scanned the area for a few minutes, but it was dead silent now. Just as I was about to shrug it off, Spencer shouted from the pool, "Did you throw something in the water?" I turned back to her, confused. "No? Why?" She laughed nervously. "I heard something hit the water like a splash." I grabbed the pool light switch and flicked it on. We both stared at the bottom of the pool, and that's when we saw it. A stone tablet, maybe a foot long, just sitting there at the deep end. It was covered in strange symbols like hieroglyphs, something that didn't belong in the pool, that's for sure. "What the hell?" Spencer whispered. Neither of us knew what to make of it. I didn't want to admit it, but it was starting to freak me out. "Let's get out of here," I said. We dried off quickly and carried the stone tablet into the house. We didn't know what else to do with it, so we left it on the coffee table in the living room. I tried not to think about it. Later that night, Spencer was in the bathroom brushing her teeth when she let out a scream that made my heart jump into my throat. I ran to her, finding her pale and shaking. "What happened?" I asked. "I saw a face," she said, barely above a whisper. "In the mirror. It was white and dusty, and it wasn't mine." I didn't know how to react. "Maybe you're just tired," I said, not really believing it myself. The house was starting to feel off. But I didn't want to scare her even more, so I shrugged it off. The next morning, we showed the tablet to my mum. She immediately mentioned that she had a terrible nightmare the night before, saying she saw a white, dusty face, exactly like the one Spencer had seen. My mum wasn't the type to believe in ghosts or any of that stuff, but the fact that she described the same thing Spencer had freaked me out even more. We tried looking up the symbols on the tablet, but nothing matched. No language, no symbols that made sense. My dad said it was probably some kind of prank, maybe one of the neighborhood kids. I wanted to believe him, but something about it just didn't sit right with me. That afternoon, things got weirder. Our dog, Scout, a big golden retriever who loved running around the yard, came back covered in this white powder. At first, we thought maybe he'd rolled in something, but it wasn't dirt or mud. It was more like dust, thick and chalky. We tried brushing it off, but it stuck to his fur like it was part of him. While we were hosing him down in the backyard, my dad wandered over to the far end of the property to see if there was anything strange going on. A few minutes later, he came back looking rattled. "I saw a man," he said, wiping his forehead. "He was just standing there, past the fence, covered in white dust. But when I got closer, he disappeared." That was it for my mum. She picked up the phone and called the realtor, demanding answers. The realtor hesitated at first, but eventually admitted something disturbing. The previous owner had requested to be buried in the backyard. No gravestone, no marker, just his body somewhere on the property. It was his final wish, she said. Apparently 2 other families had owned the house after that, but none of them had stayed long. We weren't about to stick around to find out why. That night, everything came to a head. We were all sitting in the living room, trying to ignore how strange Scout was acting. He kept pacing around like he was searching for something, whining under his breath. My mum couldn't stop checking the windows, and Spencer kept glancing at the stone tablet on the table, almost like she was expecting it to move or change. It was around midnight when we first heard the noise, faint but unmistakable. A soft creak, like someone was shifting their weight upstairs. We all froze. The sound came again, louder this time. Footsteps, slow and heavy, moving across the ceiling above us. No one spoke. We just sat there, listening. The footsteps were deliberate, unhurried, and getting closer. It felt like whoever, or whatever, was up there wanted us to know they were coming. My dad stood up, his face pale but determined. "I'm going to check it out," he said, grabbing the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. I followed him, barely breathing as we made our way to the stairs. Every step felt heavy, my chest tight with a sense of dread. We stopped at the bottom of the staircase, listening again. The footsteps were right above us now, in the hallway. And then, suddenly, the ceiling groaned, like something was pressing down on it. Something heavy. Dad gave me a quick glance, his expression serious. "Stay behind me," he whispered, and we started climbing the stairs, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. When we reached the top of the stairs, we saw it. The white, dusty face, just like Spencer and my mum had described. It was peeking out from around the corner, half hidden in the shadows. It didn't move, didn't blink. It just stared at us with these empty, hollow eyes. "Get out," my dad whispered, his voice shaking. We backed down the stairs slowly, not taking our eyes off the figure, but as soon as we reached the bottom, it vanished. We packed up our things that night. There was no way we were staying another minute in that house. We didn't care about the deposit, the mortgage, any of it. We just wanted out. The next morning, as we were loading up the car, a police officer showed up. We had called them about the white dust on Scout and wanted to get it analysed. The officer listened to our story with a skeptical look, but when he saw Scout and the tablet, his face changed. "That's marble dust," he said, running a hand over Scout's fur. "Where'd you find this?" We explained about the tablet in the pool, the man my dad saw, and the realtor's story about the previous owner's burial. The officer didn't say much after that, just took a sample of the dust and left, promising to get back to us with answers. But we never heard from him again. A few weeks later, we found out that the house had been put back on the market. My dad called the realtor, furious, demanding to know why they hadn't disclosed the full history of the property. She apologised, but her explanation didn't make us feel any better. Apparently, the previous owner hadn't just died. He had been a stone carver specialising in marble statues. When he passed, his last request was to be buried in his own backyard, surrounded by his creations. No one knew why, but there were rumours that he had been obsessed with some kind of ancient ritual, something to do with the symbols on the tablet. We didn't stick around to find out what it all meant. My parents sold the house as quickly as they could, and we moved into a smaller place on the other side of town. It didn't have a pool, and I didn't care. I haven't been back to that neighbourhood since, and I don't plan to. Every once in a while, I still think about that dusty face, the sound of footsteps overhead, and the cold feeling of knowing that something was in that house with us, something that didn't want us there. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if it ever really left. We had rented this big, fancy chalet deep in the woods of Oregon. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend, a break from the noise of the city. There were 5 of us, me, Will, Emma, Rachel, and Noah. We had found the place on Airbnb and the photos looked perfect. Big windows, a pool, and the trees all around, making it feel like we were the only people on Earth. It was meant to be peaceful. After we arrived, we settled in fast. The place was just as impressive in real life. Huge ceilings, a cozy fireplace, and an outdoor pool surrounded by thick trees that looked pitch black when the sun went down. The first night after dinner, we watched some dumb horror movie, mostly laughing at how fake everything looked. None of us was really paying attention, just goofing off and scrolling through our phones. It was late, close to midnight, when Noah suddenly said, Let's go for a swim." The idea sounded perfect. It was warm enough, and the pool looked even more inviting at night, with the soft glow of underwater lights and the stars above. We grabbed some towels and made our way outside, laughing and talking about nothing in particular. The water felt great, cool but not too cold. Rachel was floating on her back, looking up at the sky, and Emma was dipping her feet in, sitting on the edge. Will was making dumb jokes about being in some survival movie, and Noah kept splashing everyone like a little kid. Everything felt calm until we noticed a flicker of light coming from the woods. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was fireflies, or maybe someone in the distance had a flashlight. But the light kept flashing, not random like bugs would do, but in short bursts. Almost like someone was taking pictures. I mentioned it, and the others shrugged it off, but the flashes didn't stop. They kept happening, always directed right at us. "I'm going to check it out," Noah said, swimming to the edge of the pool. He pulled himself out, dripping water, and grabbed his phone to use as a flashlight. We all watched as he walked toward the trees, shining the light around. "Do you see anything?" Emma called out. Noah was quiet for a second, then said, "Hold on." He crouched down and leaned into the bushes. "What is it?" Will asked, swimming closer to the edge. Noah stood up, holding something small in his hand. As he walked back to us, I could see it was a camera, like one of those small cheap ones people use for hunting or security. But this one wasn't meant to track animals. It was facing the pool, right at us. "Someone's watching us," Noah said, his voice low. That got everyone's attention. Rachel got out of the pool quickly, wrapping a towel around herself. "What do you mean, someone's watching us?" Noah showed her the camera. "It's pointing at the pool, recording us." We all looked at each other, the fun of the night vanishing fast. Who put a camera in the bushes watching us? It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some lost hiker's gear. Someone had been out here, in the woods, close enough to set it up. Will was already out of the water, pacing near the pool. "We need to go back inside. Lock the doors. Call the owner or something." Rachel nodded, shivering, though it wasn't cold. "Yeah, let's get out of here." We grabbed our stuff and hurried back into the chalet, dripping wet. Once inside, we shut every door, locked the windows, and sat in the living room. Noah had brought the camera with him and was looking it over. There was no name, no marking, just a small camera with a memory card inside. "Maybe it's the owner," Emma suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "Maybe they have security cameras out here?" "Why would they put one in the woods?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "And why point it at the pool?" No one had an answer. The chalet felt different now, like it wasn't just us here anymore. "We should check the footage," Noah finally said, holding up the memory card. Will grabbed his laptop and we all crowded around as he loaded the card. It was strange watching ourselves from just minutes before. There we were, swimming and laughing like nothing was wrong, but from this hidden angle in the trees. The camera had been filming the entire time. Then, the screen flashed, and for a split second, we saw something else. A figure standing just out of the camera's frame, barely visible in the corner. We paused the video, and there it was. A person, maybe in dark clothes, watching us. Whoever it was, they were close, way too close. "Okay, this is messed up," Will muttered, shutting the laptop. "We need to get out of here. This isn't safe." No one argued. We packed our stuff quickly, moving through the chalet, checking windows as we grabbed what we could. I grabbed a kitchen knife, probably a stupid idea, but it made me feel better. Will found a tire iron in the garage, and Noah armed himself with a heavy flashlight. We weren't about to leave without knowing who had been out there. "Let's find them," Noah said, his face serious. "We shouldn't split up," Emma said, her voice shaking a bit. "What if they're dangerous?" "We're not splitting up," I said. "We stick together. We find whoever's out there, get them to leave, and if things get bad, we call the cops." So, armed with whatever we could find, we headed out into the woods, our flashlights barely cutting through the thick trees. The night had gone completely silent. Not even the wind moved through the leaves. The path was narrow, winding deeper into the forest, but there was no sign of anyone. No movement, no voices. It felt like we had been walking for hours, though it had probably only been 10 or 15 minutes. The woods closed in on us, and every shadow seemed to move when we turned our heads. Rachel was staying close to Will, and I could see her eyes darting from tree to tree, like she expected someone to jump out any second. The woods seemed endless. Every step we took felt heavier, as if the trees themselves were trying to keep us from going further. It felt like we had been walking for hours, but in reality, only 10 or 15 minutes had passed. The air was thick, making it hard to breathe, and each rustle of leaves felt like someone was watching us. Rachel stayed close to Will, her eyes darting from one shadow to the next, like she expected someone to jump out at any moment. I wasn't any less nervous. Every step felt like a mistake. "We should head back," Will finally said, his voice quieter than usual. I nodded. No one objected. We hadn't found anything, and honestly, the whole thing felt pointless. Whoever had been watching us was probably long gone, and wandering around in the middle of the night in a forest we didn't know felt like asking for trouble. We turned back towards the chalet. As we neared the house, I saw it first. A large window shattered, glass glistening on the ground beneath it. My heart sank. They had tricked us. While we were out in the woods, they had broken into the house. We rushed inside, half expecting to find everything ransacked, but when we entered, everything looked fine. Our bags were still in the living room, the furniture untouched. It didn't make sense. Why break in if they weren't going to steal anything? "We should check the rooms," Emma said, her voice shaky. She was right. We had to make sure nothing was missing or damaged. We split up, each of us taking a different part of the house. Rachel and Will headed upstairs while Emma and I checked downstairs. I went into Emma's room with her, half expecting to find her laptop or something valuable gone. But the weirdest thing was waiting for us instead. On her bed, there was a stuffed squirrel propped up against her pillow. In its tiny paws, it held a pair of binoculars aimed directly at the window. My stomach turned. "What the hell?" Emma whispered, backing away from the bed. I didn't have an answer. It was creepy. Too creepy to just be a prank. Whoever had been watching us knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted us scared. We gathered back in the living room. Will and Rachel didn't find anything else weird upstairs, but the squirrel was enough. We checked the house again, top to bottom, making sure no one was hiding inside. Everything was silent. No signs of anyone. But it didn't matter. We were all on edge. "We need to call the police," I said, and no one disagreed. We reported the break-in, told them about the window and the stuffed animal. They took the report, but there wasn't much they could do. No one had seen anything. No fingerprints, no clues. That didn't exactly make us feel better. None of us slept that night. We stayed together in the living room, taking turns keeping an eye on the windows, even though we knew whoever it was had already left. By the time the sun came up, we were all exhausted. "We need to get out of here," Rachel said, and we all agreed. We contacted the Airbnb host, explained what happened, and asked for a refund. The host didn't put up much of a fight. I think they knew something wasn't right with that place. Within a few hours, we were packing up and looking for another place to stay. We found another Airbnb not too far away. A smaller, cozier house, still with a pool. It felt safer, more private. We settled in, hoping we could finally relax after the nightmare at the chalet. We even went for another night's swim a couple of days later, trying to shake off the weirdness of the last place. For a while, everything seemed fine. We laughed, relaxed by the pool, and tried to forget about what happened. It wasn't until a few days later, when Rachel found the camera, that everything came crashing back. She was getting ready for bed when she noticed it. A small camera, barely noticeable, tucked on a shelf in her room. It was pointed directly at her bed, and worse, it was live. Whoever was on the other end was watching her right at that moment. She called us in, her voice shaky and scared. We stood there, staring at the camera, trying to understand how it had gotten there. Had they followed us? How had they found us again? That's when Will noticed something outside by the pool. Footprints, barely visible in the dirt, but they were there. Someone had been watching us again, from the woods. We felt violated, like no matter where we went, we couldn't escape. The camera, the footprints, It was too much. We checked the rest of the house, and that's when it hit us. What if they had hidden something in our bags? When they broke into the chalet, they didn't take anything, but what if they had planted something instead? We tore through our bags, checking every pocket, every zipper, and then we found them. Tiny trackers hidden inside 2 of our bags. They had been following us this entire time. We couldn't stay there. We called the police again, reported everything. This time, the camera, the trackers. But again, there wasn't much they could do. Whoever these people were, they were careful, always staying one step ahead. We left that place as soon as we could, packed up our things and drove off, not knowing where to go next. All we knew was that we had been watched, followed, and violated, and no matter how far we ran, it felt like they were always right behind us. Even now, I can't stop thinking that someone's still watching. We weren't supposed to be out that late, but it was our last night at the lake house in Oregon. The place had this quiet, eerie feel at night, and the moonlight shimmered over the water, making it hard to resist. So, when Ben suggested a late-night swim, I didn't hesitate. The water was cold even for August, but it was peaceful. We were floating around when Amy suddenly pointed toward the shore. "What's that?" she asked, her voice low. I squinted, trying to see what she was talking about. Near the rocky edge of the shore, where the land curved into the forest, there was a dark opening barely visible in the moonlight. A small cave entrance only noticeable from the water. "I've never seen that before," Ben muttered. "Let's check it out." Against my better judgment, I found myself swimming toward it. The closer we got, the colder the water seemed to get. When we finally reached the cave, it was just big enough to crawl inside. The walls were smooth, wet, and strangely warm, like someone had been there recently. We crawled deeper into the cave, the air growing thicker and colder as we moved. Ben led the way with his phone's flashlight, the dim beam casting long shadows on the wet walls. I could hear Amy breathing heavily behind me, clearly uncomfortable with how far we'd gone, but none of us said a word. Then Ben stopped suddenly. "What the hell?" he whispered, his light pointing at a pile of bags and gear scattered on the floor. I moved up to get a better look. There were backpacks, wallets, and even a couple of hiking boots lying around. It looked like someone had just dropped all their stuff and left. Amy crouched down and picked up an ID card from one of the wallets. "These are real people's things," she said, her voice shaking. "This guy, he's from Washington." Ben grabbed another wallet, flipping it open. "This one's from California. What is all this?" It was beyond creepy. There were at least 5 wallets, a few bags, even a jacket stuffed into the corner. No sign of the people they belonged to. We all stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. Ben was the one who decided to push further. He always liked to act brave even when the rest of us weren't so sure. "Come on," he said, squeezing through the narrow gap deeper into the cavern. I hesitated but followed him. Amy stayed close behind, her flashlight shaking in her hand. We found more strange things as we moved. A flashlight, some knives, and these old creepy books, filled with extremist symbols and language that I didn't understand. The further we went, the worse it got. It felt like we had stumbled into something we shouldn't have. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Someone had entered the cave behind us. We froze. I could hear Amy whispering, "What do we do?" But none of us had an answer. The footsteps got closer, echoing through the cavern. Whoever it was, they were blocking the way out. We couldn't see them yet, but we knew they were coming. Ben motioned for us to stay quiet, and we crouched down behind some of the gear, hoping they wouldn't find us. My heart was racing and I felt trapped, knowing there was no other way out. The sound of something being dragged made my stomach drop. Then we heard it, muffled, like someone trying to scream with a gag in their mouth. It was close, too close. I could see Amy's eyes widen in terror as she whispered, "We need to go, now." Ben didn't argue this time. We all moved deeper into the cave, trying to stay quiet. The walls seemed to close in as the tunnel narrowed. That's when I saw it. Bones. Piles of them. Not just animal bones, but human ones mixed with rotting clothes and half buried in the dirt. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever had been dragged back there hadn't made it out alive. Amy gasped, and I grabbed her arm to keep her quiet. We couldn't risk being heard. "Ben," I whispered, "you've got to go check if he's still there." He didn't look happy about it, but he nodded and crept back toward the entrance, leaving the rest of us huddled in the dark. We waited, not moving. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would give us away. The dragging sound had stopped, but I couldn't tell if that was a good thing or not. I strained my ears, waiting for Ben to come back or for the guy to find us. Ben came back, his face pale but his voice steady. "He's gone, but there's a girl. She's gagged and tied up." Without wasting time, we followed him. Just around the corner, there she was. Her hands were tied, and her face was bruised like someone had punched her hard. Her eyes were wide, terrified. I knelt beside her, my hands shaking as I undid the gag around her mouth. "Are you okay?" Amy asked, though it was clear the girl wasn't. She coughed, trying to speak through cracked lips. I don't know where he went," she mumbled, her voice shaky. "He's crazy. He grabbed me a few days ago. Please, you have to help me get out of here." We nodded. We weren't sticking around here any longer. Ben helped untie her wrists and she winced, rubbing at the red marks left behind. She looked weak, but she stood, determined to get out of that cave as quickly as we were. We all started to move toward the entrance, listening carefully for any sign that the guy might come back. My heart raced. If he showed up, I wasn't sure what we'd do, but there was no way we were going to leave her behind. We made it out of the cave, gasping for fresh air as soon as we reached the outside. The girl, still shaky, was barely keeping up, but we didn't stop until we were far enough away. No one spoke. We just kept moving, eyes scanning the woods for any sign of the man who had taken her. Once we hit the road, we called the police. The girl, whose name was Lily, told them everything. Within the hour, the cops showed up, and after they took our statements, we watched as they headed into the cave, guns drawn. 2 days later, we got a call. They caught the guy, and his name was Earl. He wasn't just some random creep, he was a serial killer who had been evading capture for years. The belongings we found in the cave? All from his victims, people who had vanished without a trace in the area. Lily's kidnapping was part of a pattern that the police had been trying to piece together. They had linked several missing person cases to Earl, and now they finally had him. The mystery of his reign of terror was finally solved, and it felt like a heavy weight was lifted from our shoulders. Even though he was locked up, none of us would forget that cave anytime soon. The thought that we almost became his next victims haunted us. Thanks for watching. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you like the stories.